Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode of D&D Horror Stories, we have a tale where that guy ruins multiple games of Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop RPGs with various antics, some being quite serious. So sit back, grab a bowl of your favorite dog treats, and let's get right into the story, as it is a bit of a long one. Forever DM, of over a decade, tells a collection of tales about the only player they've ever banned from their table. By Reddit user International Sun 445. Part 1. Okay, so I don't ever use Reddit. In fact, this is one of my only posts to the platform. I'm posting only because, having been a fan of the subreddit for a while, I had to get this out of my system. I'm a longtime D&D fan. In fact, I've been a forever DM for over a decade now, and I love it. I put a lot of work into my games and trying to deliver an engaging and satisfying narrative to my players. And as a general rule, we have great campaigns and fun sessions. Everyone knows what the table expectations are beforehand. Granted, our group has played together for years, and knows what type of games I tend to run. And as a general rule, the game runs smoothly, keeping a decent clip and shying away from obvious game-halting behavior. But every rule has an exception. Since my very first game, one guy has been a reoccurring face in our group, and is the topic of this post. We will just call him CC. CC has a knack for disrupting games and then swearing it's just what his character would do. Back then though, I was naive to the that guy stereotype, and came in full of excitement with my first ever character for my first ever game. The party had played a couple of sessions before I joined, but my Warforged was quickly established with the group, and we pressed on to save the world from total destruction. Fast forward through some narrative and we get to our first full party encounter. Our party, my Warforged Barbarian, a human wizard, a halfling bard, half-elf fighter, all great guys, readied our weapons and rolled initiative. CC, playing an elf druid, opted to ready a firehawk summon should anything move adjacent to him. I thought nothing of it, being new and all. DM at the time breaks down to me how combat works, and I take my first turn, charging in with a rage active and taking a swing at some living skeletons that were firing at us. The wizard went next, shooting off a spell and dealing some decent area damage. Then came CC. "I summoning my firehawk," he says with glee. "Okay, no problem," DM says. "I'll move here," CC says again with a huge smile on his face and moving his token away from the skeletons and into the far back corner of the large room we were all in. "Okay," says DM. "And your firehawk?" "It joins me," CC says, moving the hawk adjacent to him. The round moves around, and we take some decent damage from one of the skeletons exploding. CC comes up in the turn order. "Okay, CC," says the DM. "Do you take any actions?" "I'm going to sit down and play with my firehawk," CC says under a smirk and chuckle. I stayed silent, unsure what druids were all about and not wanting to step on CC's toes. But the wizard, an experienced player, says, "What the fuck, dude, go hit them." "My druid is a pacifist," argues back CC. This was new info to all of us, as CC had never mentioned this before. "Well, heal then," wizard says. "That's what the bard is for," CC fires back. There was a moment of quiet before the DM moved on to the next player, but each round went on in much of the same fashion. CC choosing every action to sit and play with his firehawk, and the party asking him to help us out. We were all reaching that point in game where our combat options were getting scarce, and our HP low, but CC insisted on sitting still. And I wish I could say it got better, but CC's druid would avoid any sort of actual interaction, every single encounter. If he wasn't playing with a firehawk, he was eating rations, or playing an instrument, or doing some weird impromptu cheer thing to, quote, keep us inspired. The campaign eventually ended, our party barely stopping the BBEG, and after the game ended, DM wanted a break to play a PC. I was the only one showing interest in taking over to run a game, so that's exactly what I did. CC was a great friend of the DM, and everyone else besides me knew him outside of the game. He and the DM had played together for a while, and having been an established part of the group, I had no issues with him rolling up a character to join us, not realizing what was to come for my future games. And this, dear reader, is where my tales of CC truly begin to take off. Now that you understand the beginnings of my experience with CC, I can really dive into the near decade of horror stories that came after, and hopefully help you understand why CC is the only player to this day that I've barred from my games. To be continued. Part 2. Continuing on from the previous post, our first campaign was finished, and I was working on my first ever run as our DM. I was definitely that DM that way over prepared for the game, having maps and calendars, holidays, moon charts. I mean, I really dumped a lot of my focus into this game, and I was excited to get it going, having just seen our party finish a complete adventure successfully. I was running a Forgotten Realms inspired homebrew, had plans to take the party all the way through the 9 hells, and it started out super well. We had a drow fighter, a human rogue, a tiefling warlock, and CC's neutral evil half-orc barbarian. The party was largely using their wits to navigate what was looking like an evil PC adventure, but wasn't taking a murder hobo route to succeed. And it was a breath of fresh air for me, coming off the back of our big heroic world-saving campaign we had just finished a few weeks prior. The party had ended up inside the second tier of the 9 hells, equipped with a letter of passage from Asmodeus, and were seeking the Duke of the Plane of Hell they were currently on so they could proceed further. Nothing too crazy, though I had time enough for crazy stuff. I just wanted to get them down into the tougher levels first. However, when the party finally made it to the Duke's tower in the middle of the plane, they made a hiccup in the way of a bad persuasion attempt that they themselves had prompted. The Duke demanded to see the right of travel, but the party didn't trust him with it and wouldn't hand it over. It was looking tense. However, I'm a very narrative-focused DM, and I wouldn't be so rash as to kill a party over a failed persuasion roll. The Duke would inevitably relent, not wanting to cross Asmodeus, but was rightfully annoyed at the intruders into his domain and wanted to air that grievance. CC was having none of it. "If he's not going to let us in, I'm going to go into a rage and charge," CC proclaims. "Just hold on, man, we need to try to talk him down," replies the warlock. "Nah, man, my guy is impatient. He's not used to waiting on people telling him to do things, so he's just going to go get it," CC replied. Let me reiterate at this point. I'm not typically a PC killer. I know how attached players can be to a character, and I don't like to just rob them of that experience without a very good reason. So I tell CC, "Look man, out of game, this dude is like a serious deal around this area. Do you need some background info on 9 hells?" "Nope, I just need this asshole to back off," CC replies with that same smirk starting to come over his face. And that's when I realized that CC wasn't going to drop this. Well, he stands his ground, demanding you answer why you're here and what Asmodeus would need with your kind, his hand outstretched for your letter. "I smack it away," he says as he scoops up a d20. The party sighed. I sighed. You're actually smacking his hand. Or you meant that out of game. "Nah man, I swat the hand out of my space." I couldn't possibly think of a way this didn't result in some serious damage. More than any of the PCs could realistically spare in their predicament. The devil rolled initiative. CC rolled initiative, apparently unaware or uncaring as to what was about to happen. And as everyone saw clearly coming, the Duke smacked CC into next week before demanding the party just go on their way and make sure they didn't intrude upon him any further. CC laughed, yelling, "What the fuck?" as I narrated past him. As soon as there was room for him to chime in, he did. "Dude, that was bullshit," he said with a half laugh of disbelief. "How the hell did he drop me like that?" I explained how the 9 hells hierarchy worked, and that the devil he hit was basically second in charge, under Asmodeus himself. I told him the math to his death, how the attack well exceeded his current HP pool by more than half his negative health value resulting in death. CC gave it a whatever while we finished the session, the party a little annoyed that they were put in such danger. We got him a new character made up, and I had a talk with him after about my want to really lean into a more serious game and chalk this up to a misunderstanding. He agreed and took his new character sheet with him. However, his new character didn't hit the table then. He said he wasn't a fan of the hell setting and would join in after they managed to escape, which to his credit he did. We welcomed the 4th PC because of how D&D and counterbalancing tends to work out. But this wasn't the last time CC directly placed his party in harm's way. But that's a story for later. To be continued. Part 3. So, from where we last left, as happens, life separated some of our players from the regular group. Graduation, college, jobs, etc. I was hungry to get a game going and was working on another homebrew, inviting everyone I knew that played or might want to play a game, including CC, who had finished our last campaign on a decent foot some years back. The campaign was centered around 9 masks that had to be found by the PCs to prevent an apocalyptic event. It was stated several times that the masks were evil and would seduce its wearers to do terrible things with great power, hence the whole reason they needed to be collected. Now, I'll say ahead of time, ending aside, this was easily one of my favorite campaigns ever. We had a 6-person group full of new players that still play to this day, with huge highs and great impromptu work from everyone involved, especially our Dragonborn Paladin of Bahamut, who made me not hate the trope. Anyways, CC was a human fighter trying to be the best arena fighter in the world, and his character was obnoxiously cocky. He would often instigate fights just to show how strong he was, and if a town didn't have an arena, would challenge the biggest guy he could find to a fistfight. This never changed, no matter how much we won or lost, until the party found one of the masks. CC impulsively decides to don the mask, prompting a wisdom save. He passes, and I tell him that the mask has increased his strength and con mod by 1, but decreased his wisdom by 1. He doesn't even acknowledge what I said, going on a monologue about how much stronger he is and how he can't possibly be defeated now, etc., etc. Now, by design, these masks are a trap for those that wear them. They were never meant for PC use. They got an entire lecture about the dangers and magics of the masks, and no one else in the party ever tried to wear one, which was a smart call. But for CC, it was too late. Each week that went by with the mask on increased all of its effects by 1. So strength and con would be boosted by 2, and wisdom would drop by 2. The next week, it would be 3. The next week, 4, etc. CC, either uncaring or never cluing into the dangers of this, welcomed the stat inflation, delighted in his new power. Then one day, CC failed his wisdom check. I had decided on the powers of the mask well before we started session 1. And as it happened, this mask caused a battle fury when its wearer failed its wisdom save. What this meant is that as the group woke up to eat breakfast, the best arena fighter in the city put on his mask and attacked the nearest creature he could, the mask dominating his mind and driving him temporarily mad. CC realized what was going on and with wide eyes says to me, "Hey, no, wait, that's bullshit. You can't just make my character do stuff. What about player's agency? He wouldn't just do that." I told him that I know it sucks, but his wisdom was at like a 7 at this point, and he failed an honest roll versus the mask attack. It had weeks to make itself more finely attuned to him, and this was the culmination of all these things. "It's fucking dumb is what it is," CC replies. "How long am I like this?" "Till the mask comes off, or you're unable to act," I said. The party came up with a plan to get the mask off him before he dropped their cleric, and managed to calm him down. But I could tell that CC was annoyed out of game, and I honestly did feel bad about making him feel like I jerked control away from him. But I also knew it was my job to adjudicate fairly, and his actions bore consequences. I didn't realize how mad he was though, that inside, CC was planning his biggest stunt yet, the cantaloupe incident. But I'll save that for the new post. To be continued. Part 4. So, as I said in the previous post, CC and I had some small friction about a wisdom save and his character raging out, and I had thought we smoothed everything out with one another, having explained how I was handling things like cursed items more thoroughly. The campaign was one where the heroes were setting out to collect a series of cursed masks across the world, and had come to a small volcanic island. The mask presumed to be inside the volcano itself. This led them down into a small cave system that looked more like some sacred site the further in they went. Now, at this time, most of our group were cigarette smokers, and we would take a break every 2 hours or so to choke one down real quick, take a bathroom break, etc., before we started back in on the game. And it was during one game where everyone but CC and one of our newbies went outside to smoke that CC, I can only assume still annoyed about the wisdom save from the week prior, concocted the cantaloupe maneuver. We all came inside after a few minutes and sat back down to start. I tell the group they entered a circular chamber. Oil pots lined the walls, each with a pile of human bones inside, and at the center of the room was a throne made of rock. where a full human skeleton sat limp, a dagger through its chest cavity. Obvious trap is obvious. I'm going to roll an investigation check, I think, says our wizard, clearly trying to use his brain to work through the room. Cantaloupe! Yells CC with a big smile as he looks right at the other player that didn't go outside with us. The other player smirks at first, then awkwardly looks at the rest of the group, who was as lost as I was. I don't know, haha, he says. Well then, I go and pull the dagger out of the skeleton's chest, CC proclaims. And that's when it hit me that these two had planned to mess things up while we were outside. CC indeed grabbed the dagger, triggering a really tough fight with fire-covered skeletons, nearly dropping both the assassin and the wizard. When the fight was done, CC laughed. Cantaloupe was our keyword, he chuckled. But new player chickened out. There was clearly some mirth in his words. I readied my weapon on CC, says the assassin. Wait, what the fuck? CC says. My drow is tired of your dead weight in our party. You nearly got 2 of us killed being careless. Now raise your arms or I'll cut you where you stand, the assassin replied. CC looked at me, then the newbie, then the wizard. The wizard, also mad that he came so close to death, summoned a wall at the mouth of the cavern, trapping CC. For once he didn't have anything to say, instead furrowing his brow and checking his character sheet over. Whatever dude, I was just trying to have some fun, sheesh. The assassin then rolled to hit, amplifying his damage as much as he could. It wasn't hard for him to cut CC down, and I can't lie, I found it amusing that the party was holding him accountable for a change. CC slammed his character sheet down and got his stuff together, telling us he may as well not play if he didn't get to have fun. We all said it ruined the fun for us having someone purposefully activating traps and putting them in danger like that. For those wondering why this was tolerated for so long, you gotta understand that outside of D&D, CC didn't take games this way. We all played Magic the Gathering together, World of Warcraft, board games, etc. And we always had a fun competitive way about us, even CC. And I think this is part of why I kept him around for so long. Well, that and not knowing too many other players at the time. But anyways, this was the last game we played of this 3-year-long campaign. I guess we all just lost the immersion, or something too hard to keep going. As I said in the previous post, I found this in hindsight to be one of my favorite campaigns. However, there were other games to play, and more messes for CC to get us all into. But those are stories for another post. To be continued. Part 5. If you haven't checked the previous post, I urge you to do so for the context of this post to make sense. And for those still working through this with me, let me tell you about the time our group learned D&D wasn't the only game CC had no issues breaking. I moved out of state for a couple years for school, coming back after a time to find a giant tabletop-sized hole in my life, coming off the back of an H.P. Lovecraft binge. I assembled those of the old guard still around the area for a game of Call of Cthulhu. I had only played the system once, and never GM'd it, so I opted to run a module. For those wondering why CC was brought back to play, let me provide some context. CC at this point was a friend outside of D&D that I had known for close to a decade at this point. We shared tons of mutual friends. We saw each other almost weekly because of this, and largely he didn't quite have such a blaze attitude with other stuff like he does with tabletop games. And I guess I had myself convinced that at some point, and maybe with a horror-style game like Call of Cthulhu, CC would decide to shake it up and maybe try to finish a game. Nope. CC comes in with a Japanese character who works as a Yakuza in America trying to help operations abroad. Or something. I couldn't really tell you what his backstory was because all that CC did was start off the bat with the most horrible stereotypical Asian accent you can picture, and made sure all of the racist humor that could entail came with it. CC is one of those anime superfans with a borderline Japanese fetish, so this really took me by surprise when we got going. Anyway, I had planned a decently long first session with a hook ending, and I figured I'd get us through this first game, then talk with CC about the character who made everything overly complicated for a game set in the Prohibition era. So that's what we did. The rest of the party largely ignored CC and instead focused on the first big mystery of the game. Afterward, I went outside to smoke and got CC to come out with me, where I told him his character was a bit too over the top. I explained that, though we had no Asian players, it was still awkward to have a bunch of stereotypes getting thrown around. and that his accent was so over the top I had a hard time understanding him. "Yeah, but wasn't Lovecraft a racist?" he asked. "I mean, yeah, kinda. That doesn't mean we have to play it up though," I responded. "I'm not playing anything up, bro. I'm just playing my character," he says. "I can't understand your character is my point," I said. "I'm not saying that you have to roll something new, but things would run smoother if you tone it down a bit. That's all I'm saying, my guy." He agrees after a quick moment of silence and said he'd tone it down. And he did when we played the next week, only for him to halt the entire game. The party had gathered clues leading to a building called the Juju Hut. All roads led to the Juju Hut. After a less than successful meeting with the building owner, the party had to find a way to sneak in, but went to bed for the night to think it over. "My character is going to sneak out while everyone sleeps to, do Yakuza business," Cece said. "Oh, well, okay," I said. "Can we do the roleplay in private? I want to keep it a secret," he asked. "Sure," I said. I could use a cigarette anyway. We step outside and Cece begins to tell me how he wants to try and infiltrate the Juju Hut by himself. I go with it, not wanting to kill his momentum. He goes to the window, peeking around and finding the doors and the windows locked. The party had a member with lockpicks, but Cece was not that character. "So I don't see a way in?" he asks. "Not right off," I say, trying to keep it vague. "Well, fuck it then, I'm gonna burn it down." Yep, he said he wants to burn it down. Are you being serious?" I asked. I knew the answer because he was chuckling to himself as he said it, with that same grin as always. But I had to verify. "Hell yeah, dude. The guy was an ass anyway, so it's whatever. My guy's a Yakuza. He doesn't give a shit," he said. Then describes exactly that. Using a cigar lighter and motor oil, he gets a fire going and destroys the building. Cops are called, and the one Japanese dude in the city running from the scene is soon found by police. The party lost their lead in a literal puff of smoke, and at that point I knew we were all checking out. So that was our last session of that game. I have yet to run a game again, though I really want to. I love the module in the system, and still haven't gotten off my Lovecraft kick. CC has yet to ever explain why exactly he thought burning down the Juju Hut was a good idea, outside of it's what his character would want to do. And though this is past the point where most DMs would finally throw in the towel with CC, I still have one more tale of his antics. The tale that finally made me give up on CC. But that's a tale for another post. To be continued. Part 6. I took a break from the DM chair for about 6 months and played an actual PC for a change, and ended up birthing one of my favorite characters ever. To this day, my group has fond memories of that game, but after it ended, the DM didn't have anything else prepped. So I took over the helm again and brought out a new Forgotten Realms inspired homebrew. Now, Cece was present for this game mostly because the guy that owned the house we played at was the last DM. And since Cece has always just sort of been around, he played in our previous game and knew we were going to start a new one. And I'm a guy with a big heart. I didn't just want to say, "Sorry Cece, everyone gets to join but you." But I did explain that I wanted a more serious tone, cause I love grim dark fantasy. We all agreed and began rolling characters. That's when CC gives me his character pitch. "Okay, he's a samurai from a land with no magic," he said. I thought for a second and said, "I'm fine with a samurai, but you know that the whole planet is magical, right?" He responded, "Yeah, but he wouldn't know anything about that cause his country doesn't know about magic." "Right, but the trees and wind and everything is magical," I said. "Do you have an idea for why their country doesn't know magic?" He responded, "I don't know. There's this other country that doesn't like them and took them over, and so now my guy and his 3 friends are on the run. Only his friends got separated, so now he's on his own trying to save his country." "Right," I said. So I did what any obsessive DM would do, and I churned out an entire history of 2 nations, one subjugating the other with anti-magical sigils and artifacts. I caught a wind of inspiration with it, and really set out to make Cece's backstory something he could chew if he wanted, hoping maybe it'd keep his head in the game. The plan was to make him a lycanthrope, something Cece had often mentioned wanting to do. and let him lead his horde of werebears against the rival country to free his people. In hindsight, I should have known giving Cece the powers of a werebear was a doomed idea. The party had wound up in a time-forgotten dwarven settlement inside a mountain. They were wary of the foreigners, but were convinced to at least let them lodge for the night. That evening, Cece decides his character needs to sneak out. "I need to bolster my werebear forces," he says, "so I'm gonna sneak into any house I can get into." He passes his rolls and makes it into a bedroom where a female dwarf is sleeping. "Okay," he says, "I'm gonna transform into my hybrid form so that my head is a bear head." Yes, literally his words. "And bite her so she transforms into a werebear." "Are you sure?" I ask slowly so he can reconsider. "Yeah, man," he responds. "And where do you bite her?" I ask. "The neck, duh," he says. Now, I'm not sure if Cece knew he was different from a vampire or not, that where the bite was really didn't matter, but regardless, he was a friggin' bearhead right now. "Are you positive you bite her neck?" I ask. "Yeah, dude," he responds. I can tell that the other players knew what I was thinking. "Okay," I sigh. "You bite the dwarf's neck with your bear maw, and she dies because that's what happens when a bear bites down on your neck." I was amazed that once again he had managed to totally muck things up, as the dwarves immediately seized the party for murder. Cece was offered by the party as recompense, and had to do a side quest to regain some trust. But Cece was fuming. "So do I need a new character?" he asks. "Probably," I said. "I can't imagine they'd let you live after that." So he goes outside and comes in 10 minutes later with his latest idea. It was a reference to the game, The Last of Us. His character was named Joel, but he said his character is Mexican, so it's pronounced Hole. And yep, it was a super stereotypical character and accent. But what really made me snap was when he said he was looking for clickers in a Hispanic accent that intentionally made it sound like a certain N-word slur. That was the final inch that crossed the line. "Okay, you're not playing this character," I said. "What do you mean?" Cece asked with an overly innocent tone. I said, "You keep making these super racist characters, and now you're basically saying the N-word, and I'm not about it. It's not funny, it's not fun. It sucks having everything disrupted when the party tries to make any sort of headway. I am not doing it." He responds, "Dude, what the fuck ever? I'm just trying to have some fun and make a damn joke," he says. "It's fucking dumb that you made me kill the dwarf anyway. I just wanted to make her a werebear." I said, "I'm not doing it, dude. We are done for the night," and got my things and left for the evening to calm down. Our game ended that night and was never picked back up, largely because I had checked out on my end. We didn't talk for a while. I was too grossed out by his conduct to handle that, but we have many mutual friends, so contact was inevitable. I've seen Cece plenty of times since then, and we still can hang out cordially without much static, but I've never had him to one of my games since. Moving to Roll20 has helped immensely with this, and I'm happy to say our group just finished Ravenloft after a steady 6-month slog and are now on our way through Icewind Dale. It's been super refreshing having a party that clicks with itself, and it's been refreshing to DM without Cece. I'm honestly surprised that OP put up with Cece for as long as he did, though I can understand giving him a few chances to change his behavior in games, seeing how he sounded like he was part of the whole friend group. Though, as with anything, there's a breaking point, and Cece seemed to push OP's breaking point to the limit, and I don't blame him for finally kicking Cece out of future games. I am glad to hear that OP and the others are still playing, and by the sound of it, having a better time now. Anyways, I would like to thank you for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving it a like and subscribing if you haven't already, as it does help this Doge out a lot. If you have a story that you would like to be shared on the channel, you can always submit it to the subreddit r/DNDDoge, post it in the comments, or even at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and hope all your rolls are natural 20s. Until next time.